Good evening and welcome to another episode of Shat Cast, where we talk all things value with video. I'm joined again this evening by Alex Lowe and Nathan Nicholson, as we are going to talk today about fears that hold business owners back from becoming more visible. And I think they cover a range of different aspects, and I think we'll try and cover a few different things from all of our experiences today, myself from a content creation perspective, Alex from his marketing perspective, and Nath from his sales perspective. So I'll kick it off, and I'll kick it off with a story about me, because I've been through this quite heavily, I think, in my journey, especially when it comes to having a lot of fear when it comes to being visible. I was very much someone who hid in the background, and being 5'2", it wasn't very difficult to hide away, but it was something that I always did. I always had, as a younger chap, I had crippling confidence issues. I hated getting in front of people, not just cameras, but just people in general. And it's right back to school. It's how I actually fell into getting behind the camera in the first place. I was coming up to my end of year assembly in secondary school. I didn't like people in general anyway, so I didn't want to stand up in front of them and start talking. And the thought of it genuinely just terrified me. At the time, my parents had got this new little VHS handycam thing. That's how far back we're going. And we would take it on holidays and stuff. And I turned around to my tutor and I said, I don't know why I came up with the idea, but I said, if I can make a good video based on our time at the school, our journey at the school, can we play that instead of me standing up? Quite luckily, he agreed. And then I said, oh, crap. And I now need to learn how to use a camera. I now need to learn how to edit. I need to learn how to do the whole process, because I'd never touched it before. I'd never even thought about it before. So to cut that bit short, I went and did it, and it worked. They loved it. And it went out. I interviewed tutors and all sorts. And from that, I actually realized I really enjoyed the process of content creation. So it threw me into that aspect, but I was still terrified. So my confidence was shot. I just never had it growing up. And I ended up trying to partner with people or have friends with me as I was started in business at a young age, who would have that confidence, would be extroverts, would get there, would go out, do the networking for me, and then I could hide. The camera was my mask for so many years that I could just hide behind. It was this shield. It was this armor that I could put in front of me, that I didn't have to make the eye contact. I was terrible at eye contact, couldn't hold it for more than a second, and it just allowed me to hide away. I used to get so scared, interesting side story, I used to get so scared when I first started having to do the networking bit. I joined BNI groups, all the little breakfast clubs. I think I've done all of them in the local area. And for those who don't know, what tends to happen in these groups is everyone around the room will stand up and do a 60-second pitch, essentially, to the rest of the room to say who they are, what they do, and what they're looking for. And I could see, as it went around the room, I could feel myself shaking more and more, and I'd literally, my whole body would go. And at the time, I would sweat profusely. It was horrible. And so I'd make extra efforts to wear white shirts, not coloured or grey ones, so you couldn't see it coming through. And to the point, because even every week, I just wasn't getting used to it, and I was shaking. So what I'd do is, as we'd reach the end of breakfast, I'd rush off to the toilet. I'd get a load of loo roll, and I'd shove it up in my armpits so that I could shake and sweat as much as I wanted to, stand up, do my 60 seconds, sit back down, and then just before we networked, dip back off to the toilet and then throw it all down the toilet. So that was my way of getting through that. And it was, like I say, it was an absolutely terrifying experience. And I could never see myself being one of these people who either stood in front of a room, stood in front of a camera, and spoke. It never occurred to me that would be a possibility. Eventually, there was a couple of occasions where I was thrown in the deep end and my hand was forced, and I had to get in front of people. And sometimes, under the right environment, the right conditions, with the right people and the right support, I think that's probably the best way to do it, is to kind of jump in at the deep end as long as you've got that support. Be careful with it, because it can absolutely go the opposite way, and it can completely make you regress on any confidence if you haven't got those elements around it. But eventually I did have to sort of start stepping in front, and I ended up on stage at a black tie business event in front of 100 business owners in my young 20s, giving a couple-minute pitch about who I was, what I did. That was a big step for me at the time. And obviously now we're at a point where we're trying to be as visible as possible, from creating video content which is pre-recorded and edited and snazzed up and polished, to things like this, where it's more raw, it's live, it's if there's a mistake, if I stumble, it happens, and we get over that idea of sort of caring, and we that in itself is a big hurdle to get across. And there's many fears that are associated with this, and probably a lot of them I went through on that journey. So there's fear of self-perception. I so many people I've spoke to over the years, I hate how I look on camera, I hate how I sound when I listen to myself back, I hate watching myself. And people naturally look for the flaws in themselves before they actually give themselves some of their own encouragement, and sort of say, well done for taking that leap. There is fear of judgment. What are others going to think of me? Everybody's going to hate me. Everybody's going to judge what I'm doing, what I'm wearing, how I'm saying it, how I look. All these thoughts go through people's heads, and it's a massive case of overthinking. And then the other one is, I find, which is quite common, is almost like a fear of facts. People don't want to be called out on their content, and they don't want to go, that's wrong. And there's an easy trick around that one, so I'll give a quick tip on that one. Which works for most industries, not all industries, but the easy one to make sure that you can, and I'll say this, you can never be wrong if you structure your content in the right way. If your content is spoken from experience and not facts, you can't be wrong. People can't call you out on what you've experienced. So, for example, for me, if I was to create a piece of content and I said, if you want to speak better on camera, slow yourself down, breathe like this, do this, step 1, 2, 3, and you will be better. That might not work for everybody, and you'll get people going, I tried that, it didn't work, you're a liar. And then you've kind of got to try, and you're on the back foot, you've got to defend it. Whereas if I reframe that and I language it in a very different way, and I say, I had this experience with a client the other day, and we tried this technique. We slowed down, we breathed like this, we did something different, we changed this stance, and they managed to articulate a lot better, they managed to project a lot better. Why don't you try that the next time you shoot? It's the same content, it's reframed a different way, but you also can't call me wrong if it doesn't work for you, because I'm speaking from experience, not fact. So that can be wangled anyway to a lot of businesses. There's obviously a couple industries that have to speak in fact. I'm thinking legal, medical, things like that. They have to get certain facts right. But generally, that's quite a useful tip that I tend to throw in. So with that being said, let's dip to marketing first. So Al, what fears do you find tend to hold people back when it comes to marketing their businesses and their mindset towards that?
It's a good question, and it's interesting because I think fear is so pervasive, and quite often we put another label on it. Like a lot of people they won't think of it as fear, but they'll think of it as like, I don't know, rationalizing, and it'll be like the paralysis of analysis, procrastination, perfectionism, all this. There's a lot of like fancy words we give to kind of get away from the fact that we're just kind of operating out of fear. And I think like whether it's sales or marketing, just that visibility bit of like getting out there, promoting, particularly with perfectionism, I think, because a lot of times we think something has to be right. Like it has to be the right video and people have to react this way. And there's a lot of control that comes from being afraid. Like, well, if I can control it, if I can control people's reaction, if I can control it exactly. And the thing I've noticed, like, and this goes for video and almost everything else, is like the most successful people I know are the people who are best at just acting without thought and letting go of the past quickly. From a video context, there was a guy who's incredibly successful and we were talking about content. And even before we got into structure, he was just like, listen, I'm just going to do a video a day. Most of them are going to be bad. Fine. Because, 6 months' time, I'm going to be better. And that's what he did. And to be fair, he was right. The first ones weren't very good. But like, I still see him even before today. Actually, I spoke to him probably about a year and a half ago. I still see his stuff online now. And he looks like a natural. He's been doing it all his life. And that's just the power of like, I'm going to do it. It doesn't matter. And also understanding the place of it. Like, okay, for the video, for example, what's the place of it? Just to be found, just to be online. Like, if we start to think, well, no, everything's got to be like a Hollywood production, and I've got to have the 20 steps, and I've got to have all of this amazing value, and it's got to be life-changing, and it's got to be... No, it could just be literally like, hey guys, having an okay day, going and grabbing a coffee, just done X, Y, Z, how's your day going? Like, that can be a piece of content. It doesn't need... Not everything needs to be amazing. And so I think quite often it's just like, it's understanding what the goal is in the moment. So like with you and networking, Joe, or public speaking or something, like I had a similar thing. Like the first time I ever did public speaking, I was very anxious and I had to go, hang on a second, what's the actual goal I'm trying to accomplish? And I was like, well, literally, if I can just connect with one person in the audience and make somebody's day 1% better, success, amazing success for me. And that made me just like relax, because then I'm like, that's all I got to do. Anything more than that is amazing. And so when you change the goal, if the goal of the video is just like, I just need to get it done, like that's literally the goal. The goal is just to get something out there, get it done. That's a success. And then focus on what I'm going to do tomorrow or next week. And so when you shift the goalposts, and a bit like you said before, Joe, it's like you either, there's no such thing as losing, like, because either you win or you learn something, and the learning's often more valuable. So either you win and get what you want, or you learn something that's going to help you get what you want. That's the distinction. So from a marketing standpoint, or promotion, or whatever it is, it's just like, just do the process. And almost try and take your fears out of it, because you have inputs and outputs. If the output is like the amount of revenue you have, and the inputs are things like, and I'm sure Nathan will speak about this, like how many sales calls you have, how many promotions you do, going on a webinar, but whatever the inputs are, how you feel is irrelevant. Like it doesn't matter. Like if you had 2 hours sleep and you feel awful and, oh God, what if this happens? That almost doesn't matter. What are the inputs that are going to get the output? Because you can feel amazing, have low level inputs, get no output. You can feel terrible, high level outputs, inputs, good output. So that's kind of what I would focus people more on, is what's the process? What's the process that you're going through for your marketing? What are the activities? Chart them. And so you move away from like, what do I feel like I'm doing? Do I feel like I'm winning? Do I feel like I'm doing good? Into what are the stats? So that's kind of one thing I'd say when it comes to marketing.
Yeah, touching something you just said there as well is practice. Like people, from a sales perspective, the more calls you make, the better you get at it. You never get perfect. And I think if you're striving for perfection, you're only setting yourself up to fail. But the idea is that you're learning and you're developing and you're getting better. And each phone call that you make, you learn something from, whether that is something that to do with your intro on the call. If you're struggling to get past the first 30 seconds, then you tweak your intro, and then when you've nailed that intro, then you tweak the ask. And a lot of people have fears, especially around asking or pitching the price. And for me, from a pricing point of view, that's, if you understand the value that you're given, the pricing shouldn't really be an objection, because you know that the problems that you're solving, you know the issues that you're addressing, you know that they have those issues, and would they be willing to pay the price, that whatever that price is that you're telling them, to solve that issue? If you've created the big enough gap, then the answer is yes. But just remember that, going back to what you were just saying around, you may not get it on the first attempt, but if you're following the process and you're tweaking as you go along, the more calls that you make, the better you'll get through practice. Just remember that practice doesn't make perfect; it makes you better.
And that's that's a common thing said by some heavy YouTube channels that I follow, which are generally all about creating YouTube channels and building a YouTube presence. Is very similar messaging. Don't strive for that perfection. I think their motto is along the lines of, every video should be 1% better. That's all you're aiming for, 1% better. If you don't do that, you're not moving anywhere. But if you can achieve that, you're making progress. And like you say, how you can look back then and you can see, I don't doubt for a second, when we've been doing these for a few months to maybe a year, we'll look back at the first ones and go, oh God, what was I saying now? Oh, I look so flat. Oh, I could be more energetic. Oh, I could be more animated. You can come up with a million different things, but that's all part of the journey. And in a similar sense to sales, is like you say, Nathan, it is about practice, and you don't get better without doing it. Unfortunately, there's so many people that think that there's a silver bullet for these sort of things, that there's one trick or one technique that they can do and they're amazing, they become masters at it. It just doesn't work like that. You have got to keep hitting it. You've got to keep practicing, and that's really the only way you can get better with it.
It's all about testing and refining, isn't it? Whether that's marketing, whether that's sales, whether that's creation, it's all about testing and refining, seeing what works, seeing what doesn't work, because that's just as valuable as what does work. But just refining as you go along. The more you do it, the better you get. You refine, and do it again.
And it's refining different things. So you can refine your messaging. You can refine the way you articulate your messaging, the way you structure it. You can refine the video itself, the quality of it. Are you using better camera, better lights, better audio? So there's loads of different elements into how you can refine it and get better. And honestly, if you keep making yourself 1% better every video, that's going to help that confidence and kick those fears out anyway. And I think that's the biggest part. And again, it comes back to the fact that this is getting rid of fears is not an overnight process. It's not a silver bullet, but it's something else said earlier is a heavy part of it is just letting go of, if you can emotionally detach yourself from what you're creating, then it helps you so much when it comes to allaying those fears. Like whether it's pre-recorded, whether it's live, whether it's raw, whether it's polished, I'm not a fan of going live. This whole thing of going, oh God, I could say something wrong, or I could mess up, or I could stumble, scares the crap out of me still. I still get nervous and anxious about it, but I'm now emotionally attached to it because I understand the purpose that we're trying to serve. I know what the longer term goal is. I know where this needs to sit, and I know what it can do. And ultimately, do I think it will impact people? Not everyone. Not everything's going to impact everyone. And which in itself is another stumbling block for people, is they think everything has to land with everyone. That's not the case. But if this helps one person, if the stuff that we talk about can help one person take an action which betters their life or their business, then I've done my job as far as I'm concerned. And that's what I'm looking to achieve with it.
It's also like, because thinking about it from what you guys are saying, like, because when I first started using video in my marketing business for myself, got probably about a decade ago, I did like, and this was, I didn't do anything fancy. I sort of had, I think it was my iPhone or something on a tripod, and I bought some lights off of eBay, like a fill light, and I had my suit on and I was recording it. And the problem I had was, like, when I did those first videos, and I still got them somewhere, is I was so stiff because I'd been taught things like, this is how you stand. This is what you do with your hands. This is how you present. This is how you modulate your voice so that everything's, all of that stuff. And so I was doing it like I thought a professional business owner should. And to be fair, it's probably all right. Like it wasn't bad, but like I soon realized, in a sense, like the more I know what I'm going to say rather than how I'm going to say it, the better. Because actually turning up as me, like how I dress, how I act, how I talk, is much better for any result I want. And also, if you commit to content for a while, actually, one of the things you notice is like, sometimes getting like what you might call critics or bad feedback or haters is actually a positive, because like it tends to be a thing before you put stuff out. Oh, I hope everyone likes it. I hope everyone gives me a thumbs up. I hope this is amazing. And yeah, if you put stuff out there and you get somebody who actually disagrees with you or says something back, it's like, this has touched a nerve. And to be honest, that was almost as thrilling to me as somebody saying, oh, that was good, was like, sometimes I would do content just to see if I could touch a nerve, because that means it's actually, in fact, that was how I was taught to do copy originally, was like, if you write something or you create something from the viewpoint of like, oh, I hope people like this, I hope this is good, it puts you into an inauthentic state, because then you're trying to create what you think people want rather than what's authentic. If instead you create it from the viewpoint of like, I hope this annoys somebody, what you're actually doing is you're tapping into more your authentic voice, because let's face it, you can't please everybody. So sometimes creating something from the viewpoint of like, I'm just going to be myself and be truthful regardless, that repels the people you don't want. It attracts the people you do. And so I'd say that's kind of what it's all about, really, is like, that's something I've learned on my personal journey, and hopefully I'm going to learn a ton more. But it's all authenticity and connection at the end of the day.
I was going to say, there's so much power in authenticity. It's still so underrated. Like you said, I think so many people still do what you did, where they go, if I'm going to show up publicly, I've got to do it in a certain way, act a certain way, behave a certain way, dress a certain way. And I'm all about just be you, because I think we might have mentioned this a few episodes back when we spoke about USPs, but ultimately your biggest USP is you, especially if you're a personal brand. Like, no one can copy you. They can copy what you do, they can copy how you do it, but they can't copy you. They can't copy how you build relationships and how people feel about you. And if you can do that on a mass scale, like you can through video, you have to be authentic to be able to get that across. I mean, I'm sitting here in a Marvel t-shirt talking to business professionals about video creation. Nath's there in his hoodie, you're there in your standard black t-shirt. We're not jazzed up, we're not suited up, we ain't got a tie on, we're not trying to talk professional to professionals, but we're still trying to offer value through our experience in our own way. I'm sitting here making jokes about being 5'2", because I'm the first two, but it's all about who you are, and it's about being as authentic as possible.
It's also like, because it depends on the context. If I was doing like some big, big branded video for a flashy website, yeah, sure, I probably would have a suit and I'd hire the full team like you guys, and I'd do everything. But it depends on what you want. But also, I think, Joe, when you were saying before about that fear of making a mistake, that's the other big thing I learned between doing those original polished videos and my other ones is I roll with the mistakes. Like, instead of editing, like, blah, blah, edit. No, instead I just go like, sorry, hang on, let me just get my thoughts together. Oh yeah, what I meant to say was, because then it's like, instead of me going out of flow or having to recapture something, it's authentic, because people like it when they see people that are slightly vulnerable, because it's like that. Oh, it's like me. They even put this in movies where in the beginning of a movie, they'll have the hero do something like save somebody or just do a little thing or be humbled in some way, because then you feel for them and you're like, oh, I hope that person wins. And so it's the same thing about like, enjoy the mistakes, enjoy the process, because that's what it's all about.
It's about being real, and it makes you personable. It makes people connect with you and emotionally buy into you. And if whether that's a mistake or even just a quirk that you're embarrassed about, or maybe you pull certain faces when you say things, maybe you say things in a weird way, and maybe you've got a bit of an odd accent which some people find funny. Same with me with saying that I'm little. Lean into it, embrace it, and have a bit of fun with it, because it actually helps sell your personality. And again, it leads back into that confidence thing, and the more confidence you can build, the more you can disconnect yourself from those fears, the more likely you are to take the steps that you need to take to be visible.
And from a persona point of view, there's only so long you can carry that for. And what generally tends to happen, especially from a video perspective, is you'll put on this persona, and then over time, you'll perhaps with a bit of luck, you'll meet the people that you're actually being in front of the camera or on videos or whatever. When you meet them and they go, "You're not the same person that I thought you were." It's not a great feeling to have if you're ever put in that position. So you're much better off just being authentic and being yourself. You don't want to be going, yeah, I kind of put on a show when I'm in front of the camera, because your trust levels have just gone through the floor at that point. And it's very difficult to get it back.
There's some people who are around at the minute. I won't name any names, but there's definitely some people who have relatively high profiles, and personally, I've never actually met them, so I'm not going to. I've got no personal thoughts or opinions on them. But from people who I've spoken to a lot of people who have met them, whether it's been their event or whatever. And one of the first things they always tell me is, on stage, this person is a different person, absolute animal, and they're amazing at being able to just switch it on and go for it. The second they're off stage, or even people that like knows them in the school playground because their kids go to the same school, completely different person, introverted, doesn't want to interact, but that's what they end up remembering, and that's what they take away from it, and that's what they end up talking about, which shows you that the value of their content isn't getting across.
Yeah, I mean, I put it in a position of, from when I'm teaching salespeople and sales teams, is never lie to a client, because that's effectively what you're doing. If you're putting on a fake persona, you're basically lying to the people that you're trying to actually sell to, and there's no coming back from it. If you don't know the answer, I will say, be honest, say, look, I don't know, but I'll go and find out. There's no simpler way of doing it than. But the minute that you start to try and fit your agenda in there rather than the client's agenda, you're on the back foot. So, and you'll never get turn that around. That client's lost when they discover that you've lied to them. So, and it's exactly the same from a video perspective.
And you're only with that, if you start lying to people and trying to be something you're not, you're only going to fuel your own imposter syndrome, which is only going to refuel your fears and every now and then trigger you into not wanting to do something, or not wanting to take the next step, which is going to help you be visible or gain authority or push people towards conversion or anything like that. Al, from your marketing side of things, you're always the man for tips and tricks and techniques and all that sort of stuff. So if it comes to, again, sort of maybe conquering these fears and trying to overcome some of these obstacles, what's your normal sort of go to? Try this, do this tip, etc.
Yeah, good question. I think there's a couple of things. I mean, so the first one, as I hinted at before, is changing what your goal is, like what success looks like for you with a video or something. Because oftentimes we have these impossibly high goals we unconsciously have, where things have to be amazing, we have to be in full control, and we have to be a certain way. And so just working out, like, well, actually, what is the definition of success, and lower or raise the bar to an appropriate level. And then it's also about like from a sales perspective, as like Nathan was saying before, it's like what you don't have to be like inauthentic to sell things. Like what you have to often do is channel your own authentic like excitement about something. That's why like the best salespeople I know are promoters. They have sheets where they have written down like all of the case studies and all of the amazing things about their product and all of the wins they've had, and they'll read it like before they go on the phone or before they pitch or before they, because that activates in them their authentic desire to like, this is amazing. Like, I've got to tell people about it. And that's not inauthentic. That's them tapping into an authentic, like, this is my reason why. This is why I'm doing something. And if you're communicating from that state, it's the same with copywriters. When you write copy, what you often do is you research to the point where you're like, this is a no-brainer. Why would somebody not do this? And then you write from that perspective, because then that channels it. You're not making stuff up. You're rather finding the right kind of reason. So set your goal, get your emotional state right. And then also, like, as I say, if mistakes or if things happen, always count your learnings. Be like, what's the gift in this? Okay, you know, whatever happened, like, what's the gift? What's the gift in my fear? What's the gift in these situations? What is it giving me? Every situation that comes along that's uncomfortable, awkward, anxious, stressful, it brings the gift of you get to become bigger and better on the other side of it. And after you've confronted those, after you've had those 2 seconds of courage that it takes to act in spite of fear, to do it anyway, you become better and bigger. And when you look backwards at where you were 6 months ago, a year ago, 2 years ago, that's how you accelerate your route to success. So some simple little things there, but I think like if we all start to use them a bit more, it really, really helps.
I think it'd be cool to actually go around here actually. So Nate, just to finish up, we'll go with you, and then I'll have my input. But from a sales perspective, for those who are fearful of their self-worth, their self-value, how would you generally tend to help them with those sort of fears and overcome them?
I think it's just having a conversation and actually just asking them questions around what it is that their products do. I mean, for me, it always helps when you work in a team. If you're as an individual, it's quite difficult to do. But actually, when you've got a team of people that you can ask the questions of what problems do we solve, what issues do we address, what business issues do we address, more importantly, and actually having a list and just writing down whatever comes into your mind. And then working as a team to identify, okay, so what are the top 5, what are the top 10 issues that we address, what are the top 10, and then go through it. And then once you've done that, actually take that to the next level and go, okay, so what are the impacts that not solving these issues will have financially, timescales wise, whatever the impact is as a business. But it's much easier to do as a group rather than as an individual. So if you are an individual, ask colleagues, friends that you worked with previously what their thoughts are, because they will also have a different perspective. But doing it as an individual, you have biases and you kind of go down a rabbit hole. But as a collective, you find it much more powerful to go through that process.
I think doing that exercise as well will actually come out with some really interesting results, which in itself could create content from. If you understand the cost of the impact of not doing what you should be doing or what you'd like the client to be able to do, then that in itself can help open the eyes of the client and sort of make them realize actually it's probably more important to do this than not do this. So we'll come around to mine. We'll land with this. So with content creation, I spoke to so many people over the years where it has been fearful and they've been scared of the camera, or they've had a perceived fear of the camera and shoot days, and then actually quite enjoyed it on the day, and afterwards it's been a bit of a sort of a guilty pleasure, really. What I did often find is actually it wasn't being fearful of the camera or the shoot, it was the suspense in the build-up. It was the anticipation that actually fueled them full of fear. So one thing I used to do when I was younger, and I did it when I did that talk on stage, and I did it anytime I was at like a high pressure event where you have certain things happen that you have to capture and you can't miss it because there's no take two. Things like that used to make me really anxious. And there's a little trick I used to do, which apparently does actually have a name and it is actually a technique, and I didn't know it at the time, and I can't remember the technique's name, so I'm just going to call it the Back to the Future for now, which will make sense in a second. So what I used to do is say it's a big event, high pressure event, and you've got maybe a couple moments that you've got to hit. I would, rather than sit there the night before and sleeplessly sit there thinking, what if I missed it? When have I got to do it? What time is it? Where have I got to be? Where's what? All that sort of stuff. Everything goes through your head and you overthink. I would think about the following day, and I would think about myself thinking back to the day it happened, if that makes sense. So 2 days on, I'd think to the day back when it's actually happening, and I'd think about the relief that I'd feel that it's done and it's over. And through my head, I'm already starting to think, that wasn't as bad as I thought. That actually went okay. All those fears were for nothing. And actually, if you can do that for 5 or 10 minutes, you'd be really surprised actually how much that calms the nervous system and how much it really helps you then prep for whatever that thing is. So, and you can, if it's fear of camera that you're worried of doing, do it an hour before and just calm that system so that you can go into it going, yeah, no, this ain't going to be that bad. Because I can guarantee it won't be. And you'll have a lot of fun. You won't admit it afterwards. Most people don't. But you can see on their face by the end of it, they enjoy it and they want to do a bit more. So I'll leave that there. If anybody else has got any thoughts on fears, by all means, drop us a comment. If they have any thoughts on topics or questions that you'd like us to discuss and talk about on Shat Cast next week, then please do message one of us or drop it in the comments below, and we would love to have a conversation in and around it. We will be looking at having some guests on soon as well to talk about their experiences. We've got a few lined up, so keep an eye out for them. If you want to see past episodes, then as you can see along the bottom there, follow us on YouTube at The Shatter Guy. And for now, I'll say goodbye from me and the team, and we will see you next week.